What is a cool history fact that you think people should know? Not sure how cool, but definitely funny. When Khosrau destroyed Antioch, he took precise measurements of all the buildings and rebuilt the city nearby and named it roughly better than Antioch because Khosrau built this just to spite the Byzantines. The Roman Emperor Commodus tried to rename Rome, Commoda, after himself, tried to rename the Romans, Commodans, again, after himself, and would dress himself as Hercules and dress up crippled war veterans as monsters and beat them to death in the Colosseum. Publicly. The Romans, the Commodans, did not take it very well. One time the British Navy kidnapped 2 Maori chiefs in the hope of learning the secrets of Maori rope making. Not realizing that in Maori society rope making was traditionally a woman's job, so these poor chiefs had no idea what they were doing. In World War I, many leaders of European countries, Russia, England, Germany, were cousins or at least related because Queen Victoria had 9 children and married many of them off to other kingdoms which became countries. During World War II, a Syrian brown bear cub named Wojtek was bought and adopted by a group of Polish soldiers who had just escaped the USSR. He became such an integral member of the 22nd Artillery Company that he was registered as a private so that the army could provide him rations. At the Battle of Monte Cassino, he helped carry ammunition crates, and he became something of a celebrity among Allied forces. After the war, he retired to the Edinburgh Zoo. A lot of the countries in the British and Dutch empires were actually conquered and run by private companies. Also, New York was originally called New Amsterdam, and Wall Street is where a wall was built to keep out Native Americans, pirates and the British. Did you know that at one point during the Second World War, the Germans built fake airfields from wood to trick England and its allies into believing they were more powerful than they actually were? England saw right through this and took the piss out of it by building fake wooden bombs and dropping them on the airfields. This one time in Salem during the Salem witch trials, there was a farmer who had a chicken that had the coloring of a rooster. Today we know about this phenomenon, but back then they just believed it was a rooster. But then the rooster laid an egg and that's when the shit hit the fan. The town believed that the chicken was sent by Satan himself, and when the egg hatched it was going to be a demon. So, naturally, they tried the chicken and the judge decided that they must burn the chicken at the stake as well as its egg. Round Earth was generally accepted by all throughout most of history with few exceptions. Columbus thought the Earth was round when he sailed, and those who commissioned him to do so believed the Earth was round also. The whole Columbus believed the Earth was flat. Think came from Protestants making propaganda against Catholics to look stupid. The great American dancer, singer/actor, Fred Astaire had to record the sounds of his tapping feet after he had filmed the dance sequences. In the early years, 30s, 40s, Hollywood sound engineers couldn't isolate the tap sounds, so Fred and Ginger had to recreate the sounds in post-production. That makes his cinematic achievements that much more impressive to my mind. I got this fact from Astaire's autobiography Steps in Time. Charles-Henri Sanson was the executioner of Paris under Louis XVI's rule. He was the offspring of an entire family that took executioner positions all over France. He was related to the executioners of Lyon, Marseille and other places. He inspired Joseph Ignace Guillotin to develop the guillotine, although there have already been machines with similar functions, like the Scottish Maiden, after explaining to him the logistic effort that goes into his task. Before the guillotine, beheadings by sword were common, and such needed a sharpened blade for each delinquent and a skillful executioner to hit the mark properly to end the delinquent clean and fast. Before the French Revolution he was the executioner of the king, and when Louis and his family was sentenced to death, he was, well, the executioner of the king and queen and the crown heirs. However, he was also the man who executed Robespierre. That mad Jack Churchill, no relation to Winston, I think, was an epic crazy boss of a man who more people should know about. He hunted Nazis with a sword and a bow and arrow in the middle of battles like D-Day. Also, I think more people need to know more about the Korean War. Hopefully before all the veterans of it pass away. Normandy gets its name from a band of Vikings that was granted territory in northern France in exchange for protecting the French lands. The descendants of those Vikings, the Normans, would end up conquering England while still keeping their French lands, bringing England in direct contact with mainland Europe. This would much later lead to the 100 Years' War between England and France, and an animosity between the two countries that lasted until the modern age. Giving those Vikings land was possibly one of the worst deals in history. At the Battle of Cold Harbor, the flag bearer of a Union regiment walked ahead of the troops right up to the Confederate entrenchments, only to realize that every single man of his unit had either been gunned down or fled. He turned around and walked back the way he came, unmolested. Alexander Pushkin, the founder of modern Russian literature and by many considered the greatest Russian poet, great-grandfather, was abducted as a kid in Cameroon and brought to Russia. He later presented a gift to Peter the Great, by whom he was then freed and adopted. He was raised as his godson. He was black. The first atomic test was at the Trinity site, just east of San Antonio, New Mexico. While this was a top-secret test, the people working at the site tipped off the townsfolk they'd gotten close to take a look east at about 5:30 a.m. on July 16, 1945. Also, the people that worked there had a legit fear that the atomic reaction would be never-ending and that they could cause the end of our world with the detonation. In 1814, while the British were burning Washington, D.C., the city was hit by a storm that dropped a tornado right into the heart of the city, killing several British soldiers. The storm ended up putting out most of the fires. As a D.C. area native, I always find the story interesting since tornadoes occurring within D.C. itself is rare, so it's just fascinating that one of the few times it occurs is during the only time in history that the U.S. Capitol is occupied by foreign forces. Mammoths only went extinct 10,000 years ago. It's thought they died out because of overhunting and natural climate change. And dodos went extinct in the 1600s. Many scientists believe the dodo didn't fear humans for some reason, though some believe it's because dodos didn't have any natural predators. They were incredibly easy to catch and were hunted to extinction.